Hello, everyone. My name is Julie McVey, and this is Unordinary Made Ordinary, where we talk about extraordinary experiences of everyday people. After today's interview, if you would like to continue the conversation of all things metaphysical, paranormal, and supernatural, feel free to join our private UMA group by clicking on the link in the video description. And today our guest is Ken Leth, or is it Leth? I forgot to ask you that.
Let.
Leth,
L-E-T.
welcome.
Yes, thank you.
I am so
And you
glad you're
said my
here.
name right. You said my name right the first time. That's wonderful. Thank you.
I got it wrong the second time though, but that's okay. Ken Leth, I am so happy you are here. So we're going to just start off, get right into it because we have a lot to discuss. And we only have an hour. And you've had some amazing experiences, Ken. If you wouldn't mind, could you just please let us know a little bit about yourself, a little background on yourself?
Okay. All right. Well, I just turned 67 a few days ago.
Nice. Happy birthday.
Well, thank you. And I can tell you that when I was in my 20s, I thought 30 was old. And
Yeah.
I didn't think I would ever get this far, but here I am.
Mm.
I'm married. I have a daughter, and she's, let's see, what is she? She's 28 this year. Let's see, what else can I tell you? I live in central Nebraska. So if you have images preset in your mind of what a Nebraskan is like, I'm here to blow them all away.
Okay. My dad grew up in Nebraska.
Oh, did he really?
Mhm.
Well, I think Nebraskans have their feet well planted, very, very solid people.
Yep, I would say that.
We're the salt of the earth. We know how to plant a good garden.
Yep.
Those kinds of things,
Mhm.
basic, simple things. But also, one thing I love about living in Nebraska, because we just moved here back in 2013. Up until then, I was living in Denver.
Oh,
That's where my work was, and that's where I
okay.
met my wife. And we got married, and I moved her back here when I decided to retire.
Very nice.
Yeah. So we're loving the country life. We live in
Mm.
a very quiet area, and there's corn all around us, or cattle.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
And
very nice.
yeah, the air is
Beautiful.
always very clean. Yeah, it's very beautiful out here. The only thing that I don't like is the tremendous heat with the humidity.
Mm.
And then I do have a few allergies, so I have to be careful about that,
Mm.
pollen and things.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, we just love it here.
Very good.
So I'm retired. I live a very quiet life. I love to cook. I like to get creative with my cooking. Um, let's see, what else could I tell you? I love to meet people, new people, get to know them a little bit, find out what makes them tick,
Yeah, me too.
And I'm trying my best to always be very supportive and understanding. Because,
Good.
we never know what others are up against in life. We just
Mm.
never know.
True.
And so one of the things I hate, if you want to get into social media, one of the things I hate about social media is how there's always people trying to put others in a box.
Yeah, true. Right.
You
Very true.
belong to a certain political party, you're in my box. I won't let you out. You
Mm-hmm.
can't prove different.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I wish people would stop doing that to each other.
Let's get out of the boxes, shall we?
Out of the box.
Let's
And
get out of the box.
I don't care if you put a label on me. Just try to be understanding that there's reasons behind everything we do, every one of us.
Yeah.
And maybe part of that is from my near death. I don't know.
I'm sure I would think that had something to do with it to make you much more open to
The greatest lesson,
possibilities.
yeah, the greatest lesson I learned, I believe that I brought back with me when I came back from my near death is every single one of us as an individual is loved by God. And it doesn't matter who you are, what color you are, what things you believe in. Every single one of us we're alive by providence because of God's love. every single one of us. And I believe we're here to do the best job that we can while we're here. So that
Well,
means that
yeah.
means that means being good to people and understanding and supportive. And
Yeah, absolutely.
so
We need that.
I guess
We need more
I
of
guess
that.
yeah, and I guess I can get off my soapboxes and I'll grab on. I don't have to coach everybody all the time.
Well, so speaking of near-death experience,
Yeah,
since yours was at such a young age, would you mind sharing a little bit about that? Maybe walk us up to how it happened and then your experience when you went through it.
sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Um, so it happened in 1963. Now, the year before I got sick and had my near death, I did have an out of body experience on the playground at school. So that would have been 1962.
Okay.
Um,
Do you want to share your out-of-body experience first, since that happened first?
I think it could have been related to why my near death was so intense.
Okay.
So if you don't mind.
No, absolutely. All of this is fascinating, all of these topics.
Okay. So yeah, I'll start there. 1962, second grade. Playground, of course, was a favorite thing. And I was racing with another kid, and we ran to something we called the jungle gym.
Mhm.
I ran to the top. You had to crawl up. I think it was only about 6, maybe 7 feet high, but I was on the top, and I fell off backwards, straight back. And when I realized that I'd made a mistake, there was nothing there to catch me,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
literally jumped out of my skin.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And when I did that, my body went down, my soul floated.
Mhm.
And all I remember was as my body was falling, um, I was grabbing for a pole that was right next to me.
Mhm.
Part of the jungle gym was we had a pole you could slide down. It was like a fireman's pole. It was right next to me.
Mhm.
I saw the pole. I started grabbing for it, thinking I was still in my body, and my spirit arms went through the pole. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And there
Yeah.
was nothing there to hang on to. So then I realized that my body was on the ground and I'm floating above it. I also remember that I kind of glowed like blue.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And then eventually I wound up on the ground, and a bunch of kids plus a teacher were rushing toward me. And I heard screaming because I guess they saw me fall.
Mm.
And yeah, I just lay there and I kept trying to get back into my body, and I did. And by the time people came to me, my spirit kept trying to jump back out of my body. So I must have hit the ground really hard.
Wow.
But somehow I managed to stay down in my body. And then the teacher sent me home. My mother came up to the school, picked me up. And I tried to explain to my parents, that afternoon, that evening, I was trying to explain what happened to me. In second grade, you describe things the best you can.
Mhm. Yeah.
My parents didn't think much of it. They just thought I had a bump in the head and that was it. Well, then, okay, jump a year later, I got really sick at school. I
Okay.
wasn't feeling very good. I got home. I was playing outside with some neighbor kids, and it was time for dinner. Supper. We called it supper, but it's
Mhm.
time for dinner.
Yeah.
And so we get called in. My mother had made something that was a favorite food for me. And so I was hungry and I was eating, but all of a sudden I got really sick and I had to vomit really quick. So
Mm.
I had to run to the back of the house to the toilet. And um, I stayed sick for about a week and a half after that.
Wow.
My parents, they called a doctor and told him my symptoms and what was going on. But between the doctor and my parents, they decided it was just the flu.
Hmm.
So they kept me home. But as it turns out, it was appendicitis.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I don't know if falling on the playground the year before might have had something to do with that. I don't really know.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I got really, really sick to the point that I was extremely pale. Um, Long story short, I was alone for like an afternoon
Mhm,
toward the end of that sickness.
mhm.
My mother, she worked, and so
Okay.
for some reason, to keep her job, she had to leave me alone for like an afternoon.
Mhm.
Well, when you know, during that afternoon, I woke up with dehydration,
Mm.
extremely sick. I was so thirsty, I couldn't stand it. I somehow managed to get to the kitchen sink. Excuse me. I somehow managed to get some water at the kitchen sink and took a drink and passed out. Fell down on the floor. And I don't know how long I laid there, but what I remember was by then the sickness was so strong. Um, all of my vision, all the color faded to white.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I was like surrounded by white light. And it was a real fuzzy feeling. I remember it feeling really pleasant, actually.
Mm.
Um, and then I woke up on the floor and somehow I got on my hands and knees and crawled back to the couch where I had been sleeping. And then my mother comes home from work and she looked really concerned. I guess I was just as pale as a ghost.
Mhm.
And so she wound up taking me to the doctor the next day. Excuse me, I got a little bit of a frog. Sorry.
Oh, no, no problem at all.
When you get older, every so often you got this kind of stuff you have to take care of.
Oh, I drink a lot of water myself, a
Yeah,
lot.
so good for us too. So my mother was really worried when she saw how white I was. Um, so she put me in the car the following morning and took me straight to the doctor. I don't even think she had an appointment. She just
Mm.
walked in with me.
Mhm.
Doctor took one look at me. He knew something was seriously wrong. And he poked me in the stomach and it hurt. And I didn't realize how painful it was until just then. So he knew and he told my mother, take him straight up to the hospital. We're going to have an immediate operation.
Right.
So I don't know. I've told people in other interviews it was like a half an hour, maybe it was more like an hour. I was on the operating table. It was that quick.
Mhm. It's an emergency. Yeah.
Yeah. So and this all took place in Nebraska. So the surgeon actually lived like 30, 40 miles away.
Mm.
Somehow he got in his car and sped all the way to my little town
Mhm.
to do the operation. Um, so in those days, 1963, they put me under with ether. They didn't have
Wow.
injections like they do now,
Right.
or at least my little hospital didn't have those.
Yeah.
So there's not many people that can relate to what it's like to go under with ether, but I can tell you for anybody that's curious, it's not supposed to have a smell, but I smelled it and it stunk. It was
Huh.
horrible. And I was gagging and coughing and but the way they did it was they put like a, a screen over my face. It was like a mask and a screen. They covered the screen with something like a cloth, like a towel,
Mhm.
and they must have poured the ether on that cloth. And
Oh,
then
wow.
the only way I could breathe was the
Yuck.
fume.
Okay.
Well,
That's
there was okay.
horrible.
So I'm breathing this stuff. What it felt like is it hit me fast and hard. It's like bang. The next thing I knew, my consciousness or my awareness was outside of my body. And I felt like my body was stationary on the table
Mhm.
and my consciousness was circling my body like an orbit.
Oh,
And
okay.
it went on for a good
Interesting.
couple of minutes. And then all of a sudden, bang, and I was out and it was black.
Okay.
So Then the doctors went ahead and started cutting me open and doing their thing. I don't know how long I was in that darkness by myself, but at some point I became aware that I was still alive, that I was still me. I was down to the root core of my existence in the spiritual form in this darkness. So I was out of my body.
Were you feeling any fear in the darkness?
Not at first.
Oh,
That,
okay.
that came later. At first, I felt actually painless,
Yeah.
uh, warm, comfortable.
Okay.
I felt like I know who I am.
Hmm.
And when I knew that I was me, I felt okay with me. So yeah,
Did you feel like an 8-year-old Ken or a grown-up soul?
I still related to the fact that I was 8 years old. I was my 8-year-old self. But then at some point, I do remember a voice, and it was like a voice was asking me, do you want to live or do you want to die?
Wow. For an 8-year-old.
Yeah, what a question for somebody to deal with at that age. So my answer was, I want to live. Of course I want to live. And that just seemed to set everything in motion. From then on, I experienced something that somebody who wants to live would have to go through.
Okay.
So I started making checks on myself. I'm like, who am I? I am who I am. I am me. Then I started looking around. My vision started coming back to me. I could see myself.
Oh, you saw your body?
I could see my body. I could see my arms.
Okay.
I could see my legs, and I looked like myself.
Oh, not bluish this time. Just
Well, that part, I don't know that it was, I don't recall the color blue, but I do remember looking wispy,
okay.
kind of transparent.
Yep.
But I knew I was me, and I was okay with that. And then I started getting curious about my surroundings. It was like, well, where am I? And then I started asking, am I really safe here? What's going on? And so I wanted to see again. I really missed my eyes. I wanted to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
see. So after a period of time, my vision started to come back. I started seeing things. And then I wondered how come I couldn't hear anything. So eventually my hearing started to come back.
Mm-hmm.
The very next thing I remember is I saw spirits coming up off the surface of the planet below me. I realized I was up above and hovering. I saw spirits coming up from below me. They would kind of stop and hesitate, and then they'd shoot on up above me,
Mm-hmm.
and they seemed very happy. And they also looked like, to me, an 8-year-old, they looked like grandparents. They looked old. And I think what I was witnessing was people passing away on earth, their spirits by nature rising up and then moving on up to the light of heaven is what I believe I saw. And again, they seemed very happy, very, I think, I think their happiness was based on perhaps they were sick and not feeling very good. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they were dying for a reason.
Right.
And all that led up to their passing away probably wasn't very pleasant.
Right.
But once they were released, they were away from their bodies like I was.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was freedom. It was openness.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
light, you know.
Sure.
That's why they were happy. So I saw several of them moving up, and I was wondering, you know, where are they going? I saw them go up, and then to me, beyond, up above, I realized there was some light up there, but I really couldn't tell much about it. So I just somehow knew they're dying, and they're going up to the light. And then I started questioning, well, why can't I move? And I would try to move. I couldn't. I was stationary.
Hmm.
So I started asking, why can't I move? And then I realized that there was a cord coming out of my spiritual existence
Right.
my center of existence, there was a cord,
Right.
and it was very thin, and it went way, 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 way down low. When I followed it and I traced it, I realized it went down to my actual body on the operating table.
Yes, yes. The silver cord, as some
Silver
call it.
cord. Yeah. That cord kept me stationary. I couldn't get away from it. I had no idea what it was. So I just accepted, okay, I guess I can't move. Well, one of the spirits that died below me and then moved on up, I think he might have been a minister, but it was a man. I know that. Because I do remember seeing this man slowly dying, and just very vague in my memory. I remember
Hmm.
stained glass windows. Something told me there was something religious to this man.
Okay.
But he came up, he saw me, and he stopped. And he said, "You shouldn't be here. You should move on up with the rest of us." And I told him, "I can't. I'm stuck. I have this cord."
Hmm.
And he tried to help me, and he couldn't. There was no way to get away from the cord. And boy, the memory of him is really, really vague, but it seems in the very far back of my memory, it's like he told me, "I'm going to try to help you. I'm going to go up. I will tell them you're down here and you're stuck."
Okay.
He offered his help,
Uh-huh.
which I thought was very nice of him. So yeah, he went on, and then I was stuck, and then I was like, now what? What's going to happen next? Unfortunately, I have a bad side to my near death, and that is I was attacked by bad, evil spirits.
Okay.
So I'm floating and I'm stuck. I don't see spirits coming up anymore. It's just me in the darkness. But I started using my eyes, and I started looking out in the distance. I started seeing eyes or entities watching me back. And when I realized that there were sets of eyes in the distance, at first there was just a few, then there were more and more. And it was like they were gathering because they noticed me.
Hmm.
So I think there were at least 3, maybe 4 sets of eyes. And I also realized that they were hiding behind a barrier that was darker than where I was. So there was a complete absence of light where they were.
Right, right.
There was still a little bit of light around me because I
Okay.
was still alive.
Okay. Life force.
I,
Were these eyes human eyes? Human people, entities?
well, when I eventually saw them up closer, they looked human, but they sure didn't act human.
Mm.
They were monsters. They were animals, evil, hateful. They resented me because I was still alive.
Mm.
Um, they started playing with me. They would poke me and shove me, and
Oh, so they came close to your presence, that close to you, out of
when
their darkness and closer into your lighted area?
right, they came
Okay.
up to me
Okay.
because they realized I was trapped.
Oh.
See, when I saw them, it suddenly dawned on me that I could understand what they were thinking. And it
Mm.
scared me because it was very angry, evil stuff. When they realized I could understand what they were thinking, they knew what I was thinking.
Right. Yeah.
So, for anybody that really is curious about all that, when you're in the spirit world, there's no privacy. You're transparent. Everything about you is transparent, including your thoughts. You have no private thoughts. So they knew exactly what I was thinking, and they detected fear, and that made them stronger.
Hmm.
So they came after me.
Hmm.
At first, I was teasing and poking, shoving, and then I would express fear and anguish, and that made their day. It made them happy,
Feeding off your fear or something.
getting off my fear. And then toward the last, it got really bad. They were, they could fly and I couldn't.
Mm.
So they would hit me like in a body slam. They would fly down and hit me like in the shoulder.
Poor baby.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of this little 8-year-old. I'm being protective right now. You
Oh,
know, like, get away from that little boy. And
yeah.
he's like
Well,
kid. Would you say they're young souls as well? Like 8-year-old souls, or I mean,
they did seem like kids, but they acted like adults.
hmm,
Uh, they had knowledge of things I didn't.
okay.
Um, I started calling for help, and I do remember them telling me that to shut up, that they were going to hurt me more if I didn't shut up. But my calls got heard, and the exact words I use that I remember is, "Please God, make them stop."
Hmm.
Now, as a child, I had been to Sunday school, I'd been to church, I'd been to Bible school, I'd been taught that there's a God, that there was Jesus, there was all these Christian things. But I was too young to really relate to the existence of God.
Sure.
You
Yeah,
know,
of course.
in my life, it was mom and dad. They took care of me.
Yeah, yeah,
And God was really hard to fathom.
of course.
Relate to.
Abstract concept.
But I think I said, "Please God, make them stop," simply because I'd heard someone say that before.
Sure. Yeah, that
I
makes
just wanted
sense.
it to stop, and it was just a way to say, "Please stop." But my words were heard. And when I said that, those angry entities, they got furious with me, and they threatened me even more.
Mm.
And then I was just super mortified, terrified. But I was heard. And eventually I heard a voice way off in the distance, and it was calling out, like, "I heard you call out for help. Where are you? I heard you." And then I go, "I'm here, I'm here, I'm down here. Can you hear me?" "Yes, I can hear you." And then I had to keep calling out so he could come closer.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out what came for me was an angel. And it was a man, kind, generous, loving,
How do you
glow.
know it was an angel? Did he look like some angelic form, or what would you say?
Well, first I would have to tell you, as a child, it was just a great relief to be around something, someone who expressed concern.
Of
A
course, after
little bit of,
that, gee,
yeah, there
dramatic.
was, yeah, oh, it was terrible. There was love in his voice. There was concern. He wanted to know if I was okay.
Yeah.
Plus, the other thing that was so wonderful is, as he got closer, he glowed. Those angry, evil things that were attacking me,
Hmm.
they couldn't tolerate his light.
Okay.
It was like poison to them.
Right. Wow.
So he drove them away just by existing.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
So, oh, I was so relieved, so relieved. I was thanking him over and over for saving me. I mean, I was to the brink of total destruction.
Quite
That's my
fear.
life.
A lot of fear. Hmm.
Terrible fear, crippling fear. But he saved me and he took care of me. And we talked for quite a while. He got to know me a little bit. I did. He asked me, I believe he asked me, "I heard you call out for God. Do you know who God is?" I think he asked me that. And that's when I mentioned that I'd been to church. He had the ability to look in my past life, because all of a sudden in front of us, he was looking at things that I had been doing in my life up to that point.
Okay.
And he found a scene of me in church singing "Jesus Loves Me" with a bunch of other kids in front of the whole congregation.
Is this like a projector for both of you to watch at the same time? Okay.
It was like somehow
Hmm.
a vision of a movie, and it was there, and we both watched it together.
Okay.
And I was singing "Jesus Loves Me." So he confirmed what I was telling him. And he really enjoyed that scene, because there was another kid with me. I remember his name because I went to grade school with him. He moved away when I was in junior high, I think. But um, yeah, his name was Bobby. And he's one of those kids that you had to do everything right. and I wasn't singing the words right or something.
Okay.
Jesus loves me, and he kept trying to stop me and correct me in front of the whole congregation. And then we could see the old people sitting in the pews, and they were
Wow.
laughing,
Yeah, I bet.
they were
Cute.
having a great time with it. And when the angel saw that, he got a pretty good chuckle out of it too. He thought that was pretty cool.
Sweet.
So yeah, so he confirmed it, and then we talked a little bit more. And eventually, he was like, "Well, why aren't you moving up like all the others?" Because I
Mhm.
mentioned to him, I think I mentioned to him that I saw these others floating.
Mhm.
So I showed him my tether, and he understood instantly. He says, "Well, we'll have to check this out." So he followed the cord down to my body. When he came back, he said, "Things aren't going so good down there, so I think it'd be best if I just send you on up like the others."
Hmm.
And I was in his hands. I didn't have an opinion. I was like,
Well,
okay, if
you're
that's
just
what
a
you want.
kid.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that, uh, first of all, the angel is not all knowing, but yet can tap into your life. And that another interesting thing is that even though he's not all knowing, he has authority to send you, into heaven, I suppose. And where were your guides? Where were your, how people say, well, we have guides or relatives or something, angels, when we're in this kind of situation, and you're just a little kid. So I'm a little perplexed. Like, where are your guides? You're all by yourself.
So if you can understand, all my life, the doctor misdiagnosed me at first. There were several incidents, like in school, with teachers, authority figures, preachers,
Hmm.
all throughout my life, where they totally got things wrong with me or accused me of things,
Huh.
missed a step. And this has been going on forever with this particular life I'm living right now.
Huh.
So
Okay.
you
Weird.
can perhaps you can understand. I have a little bit of a problem with authority figures,
Oh,
especially especially the ones that expect me to automatically respect them because of their position.
okay. I appreciate that.
I look a little bit more behind all that. It's like, well, what kind of person are you? Do you deserve my respect?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've always been that way.
Okay, that's interesting.
And
I
I've run
appreciate
into
that. You
some,
saying that.
yeah, okay. And I've never mentioned that before, but it's true. I always hold in reserve a little bit of, I'm not quite sure about most authority figures.
Well, I find that interesting because there has been more talk in some of my interviews about those who, like you, resist authority figures and are trying to choose more sovereignty. And they sometimes in their experiences, they will go to a black void and they are alone and they don't have any guides around. So I wonder about the connection. I've never thought about that before, but now that you bring it up, it's got my head thinking about a lot of those stories.
That brings something to mind. Oh,
Mm.
wow. Black Void. I one time got, now this is before I got sick. There was one time when my mother was extremely angry with me, and I don't know what I did. I went down in the basement. I locked myself in a cupboard, shut the door, and it was blacker than black, and it was like a black void. And I zoned out for like an hour or two
The
because I felt safe and warm.
peacefulness. Yeah, yeah, I've heard that kind of, that it is a
And
peaceful, warm.
when I came back out, my parents were frantic because they'd been looking for me.
Oh, oh.
But I, wow, when you mentioned that, it was just like, well, I did that.
And that you used intention without knowing it to get your sight and your hearing to work. I hear that also. If we're just sitting there in a space and we're not really focused on what we want to do, then nothing will actually happen. But I love it that you kind of just naturally did that.
Yeah, and I don't know how old I was, but it did happen before I got sick. I do know that. And now that you mentioned it also, if I'm around a lot of really angry people, my ears shut down and I can't hear. And I feel a rush of energy around me that I wouldn't say it's threatening, but it's confusing.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the only way for me to get my feet back on the ground and get a good grip is to just internally focus and I just kind of tell myself, I'm not really here and this really isn't happening.
Hmm. Interesting.
And when I do that, I can bring a little bit of peace to myself and calm down.
Mm. Okay.
So, but something else I could tell you that maybe you don't know about me is I believe this is an extended life. I had a previous life. I've got memories of living in France.
Oh, you know what? I would love to hear those, but I don't want to cut off this one story. Would love to know what that angel did, or that you call him an
Yeah, yeah,
angel. So
yeah.
yes, but let's go back to those memories because that's interesting. What happened? So did you come back, or did he take you into heaven? Like,
Okay. All right, let's get back to the angel. So I was extremely grateful, very happy to be around him. I didn't want him to leave, but eventually he did have to leave. Um, but I do remember before he sent me up, like the others,
okay.
he called up. And when he did that, I saw a very distinct kind of like a yellowish warm glow, like way up above that I had not seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking to someone up there, and
Mm-hmm.
they were talking back down to him. And he was using a language I didn't recognize.
Okay.
And I asked him, what are you doing? Who are you talking to? And he said, I'm going to send you up, but first they need to know who you are. And they're looking for your family, is what he said.
Wow. Okay. Something is a little unorganized in this
In my
situation.
case, it was very unorganized. So, and I wonder if my previous life, since I'm living another life, I wonder if that didn't have something to do with it, but who
Mm.
knows? I don't know. So, so he did all that, and then he cut my tether. I did not tell you that the other thing that about him that I knew he was an angel was there were no wings, but he hovered, he glowed,
Yeah.
he had a horn on a strap on his
He
shoulder,
he had a what?
a horn, a long horn, and
A
it was
horn. Okay.
on a strap that he had
Gotcha.
over his shoulder.
Oh,
And he also had a sword.
a
And
sword and a horn.
I think the sword was around his waist. And then, yeah, but there was a sword. He used the sword and cut my tether.
Oh, wow.
And then he said, I remember I asked him about the sword. What's it for? Why do you have it?
Yeah, I'd wonder that too.
And he told me that in the future, there's going to be a battle. And I believe he meant between good and evil. And he
Mm.
goes, God will ask me to use the sword. And he said, there's going to be a fight
Hmm.
and we're going to drive away the darkness, is what he said. Um, so talk about religious icons. They're all there. So then
So the cord that didn't feel like painful or anything. It's just cutting you didn't experience anything.
it was
Okay.
there and then it wasn't. It was
Okay.
just that simple. Then he said, I'll have to protect you. So because he had to leave, he put me in something, it was like a bubble. And he said, this will protect you and this will carry you up like the others.
Okay.
And so he put me in this bubble. And what's weird is I remember it kind of squeaking almost like it was plastic. It was weird,
Hmm.
but it was big enough that I could move around in it. I could crawl around. But the main thing, what he told me was that those evil spirits can't attack you inside when you're inside this bubble.
Were the other spirits that you saw, the grandpas and grandmas, were they in a bubble when they floated up to
No.
heaven? Oh, okay.
So and I've never heard another person talk about a
Never
bubble,
heard that. No.
but okay.
But
Maybe
I
it's
have heard of people using intention to put a bubble of protection around them when they go out of body. I actually do that myself. I will use a protection.
And there's been a few times when I've meditated, I've asked for a bubble of protection, and then I recall that.
Mm.
And when you can actually focus on something physical that you've experienced, you remember,
Oh yeah, I bet
it's
it's.
easy for me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So the bubble, like the angel said, took me up. And so the next vision I remember is looking down, because it was completely transparent, looking down, and I remember seeing the earth. Part of it was dark, part of it was light. Yeah, I knew it was the earth, and it was definitely round.
In case there are questions. That's, yep.
So if anybody has this flat earth
Yeah,
thing going
yeah,
on,
yeah.
that's not true. So I went up, and then I got real interested in the stars, because there were so many. When you're away from any kind of light interfering, like I was, oh my goodness, the stars were brilliant. And I could see galaxies off in the distance, and they were just
Wow.
beautiful,
Wow.
just beautiful. So I was taking all that in, and I was looking at these stars and everything. Eventually, I realized that a galaxy, or at least what I thought was a galaxy above me, was rotating, and that was unusual. It really got my attention. Then I realized it wasn't a galaxy at all. It was like a collection of stars that were trapped in something that was spinning.
Hmm.
And when we eventually got up to it, I realized it was the opening to a tunnel.
Ooh. Okay.
I looked back toward the earth to see where I was coming from, and I realized that I was actually stuck in like a type of tube or a channel coming up off the earth. And then suddenly I realized I was surrounded by people.
Oh, okay.
Some of them were other nationalities, and they were expressing excitement and surprise at different things that they saw. And they were using languages I wasn't aware of. I think one man that was close to me, he was Asian. And
Hmm.
anyway, so I was in this channel, and it brought me up to the tunnel. And then we all were sort of released. And we were loose and set loose into this tunnel. We all floated into it. And then we were separated.
And now the bubble's gone for you, or you're still in the bubble?
No, I was still in the bubble, which is really bizarre. But yeah, I was still in the bubble. And they were all released. And then I remember moving. It was comfortable, but it was a little bit bumpy at times. Sometimes it went fast, sometimes it went slow. And there were lots of brilliant colors,
Mm.
but very pure, rich colors like golden yellow and emerald green, those kinds of colors. Absolutely beautiful colors. And then the bumpy ride of the tunnel stopped. I was alone again. I was still in my bubble, and I was floating alone again. And I went up a short distance, and my bubble stopped. And I had reached like a barrier, and it was real soft, like a cloud. And there was a little bit of light, so I could see a very soft light. And I could see like this fuzzy cloud, and it stopped me. I didn't know what it was, and I wasn't moving anymore. I wasn't scared. So I just kind of told myself, okay, I guess this is where I go. Wait. All of a sudden, a couple of arms penetrated my bubble, reached in, grabbed me by like the shoulders, got a
Uh-huh.
grip,
Uh-huh.
pulled me up. I was out of the bubble. I was set down. I was standing on something, but it wasn't solid ground. I'm sure I was more like floating. There in front of me was a man, and I had no idea who he was. And he didn't know who I was. We started talking back and forth, trying to get to know each other. He just couldn't figure out who I was.
You were using telepathy at this time with him as you get to know one another.
Probably, but
And
it felt like I was using my voice.
it's curious. You said earlier that everyone knows your thoughts, but the angel, when he was using another language, you didn't know his thoughts. And when those people in the tunnel were using other languages, you didn't know their thoughts. So I wonder if there's a way to not have your thoughts known if it's another language, at least. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And you really picked up on something I hadn't really considered. That's very interesting. But yeah, I was surrounded by people who really didn't know who I was at first.
Hmm.
I had to communicate to them so
Yeah.
they could figure out who I was.
Hmm.
I think they knew I was related to them. They couldn't figure out how.
Mm.
So I was around family. As it turns out, that first man, he was my father's cousin, I believe.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't tell you much about him except for I did pick up on his basic personality. I know he was a very happy-go-lucky fellow. I know that he was very friendly. Um, he said very kind and good things to me. He complimented me. He wanted me to feel comfortable, and I knew it.
Good. Yeah.
So I shared all that with my father years later, and my dad immediately said, "Oh, well, that was my uncle, or my, excuse me, not
Brother.
uncle. So that was my cousin Eddie,
Oh, cousin. Yeah.
and Eddie died in the Korean War.
Mm. Hmm.
So he must have died. Eddie must have died. I don't know. Korean War. I think it was over by 53. So he must have died right in the early 50s. I
Mm.
wasn't born until 55. My near death took place in 63. So Eddie must have been dead at least 10 years.
Mm. Wow.
So of course he would know who I was, you know. Um, so he took me on up to another group of people, and they were like his parents and grandparents. And so we were all talking. It turns out he took me up, since he was my dad's cousin. His grandparents were, no, wait. Yeah, his grandparents were my father's grandparents.
Okay. Yeah.
And they were grandparents on his mother's side, the matriarchs. So, yeah, they were the parents of my grandmother, Let. And so they were very simple, kind, wonderful people. They were farmers, they were homesteaders. They had many kids when they lived on Earth. Um, they came from Ukraine. They immigrated from the Ukraine. They lived in the area around Odessa.
Mm.
And yeah, I found that out years later. They were Russian Germans. Catherine the Great allowed some Germans to move there,
Mm.
and they were part of all that. Their last name was Zimbelman, so a very German name.
Mm.
I found out that my grandmother grew up speaking German. So they got to know me. We started asking questions back and forth. And finally, they were just like, "What is your last name?" And I said, "My last name is Let." Well, they got their attention. Let. They knew that name.
Mm.
And then they were like, "Well, who's your father?" And I said, "Lyle." So the one older woman, I remember her, "He's my grandson. Lyle is my grandson. I know him." Then as soon as we made that family connection, then I was swarmed by people who were related to my father.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a little bit, I have to tell you, it was, even it being up in heaven, it was a little bit overwhelming. It was too much because I didn't know how to communicate. I was only 8. I was trying my best. All those thoughts and questions came to me at once. It was too much.
Yeah.
So I do remember my great grandmother sort of moving me away from all that and kind of protecting me and making sure I was okay,
Not overwhelmed.
not overwhelmed, and explaining things to me all the time, filling me with love and happiness and appreciation, and
Hmm.
you're okay, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And once I realized that I really was protected and that I was safe and everything was fine, I was very happy. I can tell you things about my great grandparents that I normally wouldn't have known, but
Yeah. That's crazy. So you learned it there and then you brought it back with you to confirm it. That's amazing.
So I understood what their lives were like. They were farmers, the chickens in the yard, the feeding the animals, the working in the fields, the heat, the sweat, the
Now,
hard
was
work.
this information given to you in your conversations, or was it like downloads of knowing that you got?
Downloaded, downloaded knowing. I brought
Okay,
it back with me. It wasn't discussed. It was just,
a knowing that came. Okay, that's
it's
cool.
like you can look at a picture of somebody and you can kind of guess what their lives were like.
Hmm.
Well, this knowing gives you everything you'd like to know.
Mm,
It's there.
that's really neat.
Yeah. But that's how I knew they were very loving. They loved kids, um, that I was okay with them.
But
Everything
you
was good.
didn't stay, clearly. What was the big thing that made you, did you want to come back, or were you told, I mean, and how did they get the cord back too? That's a peculiar thing. Like the new cord had to be created.
Um, oh, well, I don't recall a cord being replaced at all.
Oh,
Or,
what is this? I wonder what that means.
well, the silver cord, it's a spiritual term, I believe. I think our spirits are connected to our bodies, perhaps through a cord. But once I was returned to my body, I do not recall anything about another
About a
cord.
cord. Why were you returned? I just want to, we are getting close to being out of time for this. Maybe we'll do a part two, because I know you have so many other experiences,
Sure.
if you're willing. But what was the thing that got you sent back? This
Well,
sounds like,
real quick, I was shown my extended family by an entity that I believe was Mother Mary. She took me away from my family and showed me extended family through another tunnel,
oh,
introduced me to them, and gave me basically a tour of heaven, and then brought
oh,
me back to my family.
oh,
And then
okay.
eventually it was this Mother Mary entity told me, it's time that you have to make a decision if you stay here or you go back to Earth. What would you like to do? And
Oh, okay.
I couldn't make up my mind. I liked it up there.
Hmm.
But what eventually brought me back was, I asked this Mother Mary entity, I asked her if she could send me back to Earth so I could tell my mother that I'm okay.
Mm.
And she said, no, if I send you back, you have to stay there. And then I couldn't make up my mind. So I was thinking it over, and then Mother Mary came back to me again and she said, you have to make up your mind. And I asked about my mother again, and she said, your mother is praying for you. Your mother on earth is praying for you. And if you don't return, she will be very, very sad.
Hmm.
So then I decided, well, I don't want my mom to be
Of course,
unhappy,
because you're a good little boy.
because I was good and happy and protected and everything was good. So I decided that, okay, I'll go back. I didn't realize what I was doing.
Hmm.
I was very naive. Boy, if that opportunity comes up again, I might say I'm staying up here. But anyway, so the
Hmm.
decision was made to send me back.
Okay, I see. I'm gonna have you back on and get the tour of heaven, and all these and some of these other memories that you return to you of your previous
Well,
life.
I could keep you busy for hours. Just keep asking. I'll tell you what I know.
Well, will you come back? You want
Sure,
to come back to the show? Okay.
sure. I don't mind. That's
So you
great.
come back, and was your mom, I'm sure, was thrilled because she knew you were in deep
Well,
trouble
what
during the.
she told me years later was that during the operation, the family doctor, I had a surgeon and the family doctor both were operating on me. The family doctor came back to talk to my parents during the operation, and he told them that he didn't think I was going to make it.
Oh, wow.
And I think
So
that's why my
scary.
mother was praying.
Yeah, of course.
He was trying to prepare them. What they found out was, I'd been sick and at home for so long that my appendix burst,
Oh,
and all that
wow.
infection stuff was loose in my gut.
Hmm.
And that's a very serious
Oh,
thing.
very. Hmm.
But somehow they managed to clean me up. So I was in the hospital for, it seems like several weeks, but I think they sent me home after 2 weeks.
Hmm.
You see, my near death happened exactly 1 week before JFK was assassinated.
Mm.
The day that I was sent home, the first time from the hospital, was the day he was buried. And I watched it on my parents' black and white TV.
Mm.
Um, and what I discovered years later, what I remembered years later, was I was shown up in heaven that he was going to die.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. They Part of my near death is I was shown some of the future.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. See, now that's another thing we're going to have to talk about.
yeah.
The future events that you were
Yeah,
shown.
so,
Oh dear.
but when I
How
was eight,
much?
when I was eight and I was still sick and I was back in the hospital, I didn't remember all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, I was up in heaven. The decision was made to send me back. I remember the man that pulled me out of my bubble took me back to like the same place where I was brought up, and he shoved me back down. It was like kind of rough. He was like on top of my shoulders. You got
How
to go.
weird.
And he pushed me down. The next thing I knew, I was floating, and I was in another tunnel again. This time going down, and it wasn't so comfortable. It felt
Uh-huh.
it felt too fast and too confining,
Yep.
and it frightened me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But the very next thing I remember is suddenly I popped out of all that, and I was floating over my body, and my body had been returned to my hospital room,
Oh, okay.
and the room was full of people, close relatives,
Uh-huh.
and I'm floating over my body, and I see it, and I entered back into my body, feet first through the back of my head.
Wow. Okay.
And the instant I was completely back into my body, I felt the pain and the sickness was all there waiting
Mm-hmm.
for me. My spirit could feel it again. And immediately I said to myself, I shouldn't have come back.
Mm.
It was horrible. Um, and in fact, it was so bad that I blacked out for a while. The very next
Wow.
the
Wow.
very next memory I have after that is coming to in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard voices, and I heard like my parents. I heard my Aunt Virginia. She had a very distinctive voice.
Mm.
So I remember hearing her voice. And my grandma Let was holding my hand, my palm, and she was stroking my palm,
Mm.
holding my hand. And then somebody said, he opened his eyes. He's waking up. And they're all excited. And I woke up, and then I saw everybody around me, and I was getting my bearings again. And I was trying to talk, but I couldn't. I didn't quite have
Yeah.
it yet.
Yeah.
But the very first thing that did come out of me was my grandma Let was right there. Very sweet, loving woman, just like her mother up in heaven. Um, I looked right at her and I said, Grandma, I met your mother in heaven. She's really nice. And my grandmother, my living grandmother, she was a little bit soft on the spiritual side.
Oh.
She was religious, but not very strong that way. And I'll always remember her reaction. She drew away from me. She went, oh, like she didn't know what to do with it all.
How funny.
And then, of course, the older or the relatives like my mother, my Aunt Virginia, some of the men, they were trying to reassure me. They were like, oh, you just had a dream. You were really sick. You just had a dream. And
Yeah,
they're
like
all
I don't
telling each
believe they
other
can.
that. Yeah, they were all telling each other that, like, oh, that's what really happened. He just had a dream, right? And they're
Yeah.
all agreeing. And I'm like, no, I was in heaven. I felt a
Uh,
little bit perturbed that they didn't believe
oh,
me.
I'm sure. Yeah. Wow. That's pretty amazing stuff, Ken.
Yeah,
And your memories are so amazing as well. I mean, I can't believe you can remember in such detail and at such a young, because it was a young age. So that's pretty impressive.
Well, it's like, in most of my adult life anyway, if I ever brought this kind of stuff up and talked about it, I
Hmm.
was labeled weird
Yeah,
because,
not anymore. I think it's getting more
it's getting
accepted,
out
more and more and more.
more and more people.
Thankfully, we need
Yeah.
to be talking about this stuff. I am so appreciative of you coming here and spending this time with me, sharing your story. I look forward to hearing more. I
Oh,
hope. I hope.
that would be fun.
Um,
And real quick, if you don't mind,
yes.
just
Oh,
a
no,
sec.
no. And also, I want to know how the listeners can connect with you if you wouldn't mind sharing, if you're okay with that.
Well, I'm
And your
kind of
book.
private. I'm
And
kind
your,
of private about Facebook, although I
okay.
am there. But you can find me in Twitter. So it's at Ken underscore Let, and Let is spelled Leth. That's my presence in Twitter. And if you send me like a private message or just say hi on my timeline, I'll
Okay.
answer.
And
Uh,
I will put that link in the video description. And your book can be
oh, yeah, I do have a
purchased.
book. Um, it's called michelebooks.com.
Okay.
The name of the book is A Child Goes to Heaven. Very small publisher. I don't have a big time publisher. So we don't really advertise and do all that like the others do. But I get a little more money from my books than they do.
Would you mind sending me a link to that in Twitter
Yeah,
or through email? And I'm going to add that to the video description as well so people can check that out.
sure, that'd be fine. And
Thank
then
you.
real quick, I want to explain this chair.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not trying to portray myself as high and mighty and more righteous than other people. This chair did come out of a church. I bought it out of a buy sell trade thing. And the reason why it struck me is because when I was in heaven, my great grandfather was sitting in a chair like this and he had me
Mm,
sit in it. And
cool.
when I saw this chair for sale, I was like, I want that. So I
Uh-huh.
bought it.
Wow.
So every video I do, I'm sitting in this chair, but I am not trying to portray that I'm righteous and better than anybody at all. I'm just a guy. Okay.
That's cool though. Yeah.
So, yeah, but I
Very
love that
nice.
chair.
Thank you for letting me know that. Yeah, that is an interesting chair.
Yeah, I supposedly it was sold by the Knights of Columbus, so it must have been Catholic.
Uh,
It's got the three,
yeah.
Father, Son, Holy Ghost.
Yep.
And
Yep.
this, I don't know, this thing up here, I don't know what that is. It kind of reminds me of the French
Mm,
fleur de lis. Is that how you say it? Fleur I'm not saying it right.
that's okay. Well, thank you so much, Ken. This has been fascinating. Um, and we will stay connected
Oh,
and hopefully
absolutely.
do another one of these. And thank you to everyone watching. I hope you enjoyed this interview. And if you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like the type of content we're sharing on the channel, go ahead and subscribe, hit the bell icon so you are alerted to future videos. And I hope you are all having a beautiful day or evening wherever you are on the planet or off the planet. And we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.